We don't have a lot of ritual here, just a minimum. These bells. I'll ring the bells before I start. It's a call to attention, to be present here completely, instead of being lost in the mind, in the thought. Alert, completely here, not needing to be somewhere else. As you sit there, it helps to be in the body, to feel the inner energy field of the body, inhabit the body as you sit here. Some of your attention is in the aliveness, the animating presence of what on the surface looks like a physical body. The rest of your attention is on sense perceptions. And now in that state of alertness, something miraculous happens. It doesn't look significant at all from the point of view of the mind, but in that state of attention you can be here fully awake, fully alert, without needing to interpret this moment mentally, without needing to label what's happening. You can be so aligned with this moment that thought is no longer needed. And you haven't gone to sleep. You're more awake than you would be if you were thinking. Just an alert presence. We could call that the awakening of intelligence. One more time. The undercurrent, as we sit here and words come out of my mouth, the undercurrent of this is always the state of attention, the state of presence. The words may refer to certain obstacles to the state of presence that arise. the conditioning of the human mind, ways in which the state of presence can easily become obscured. I may talk about that, who knows? And yet, no matter what words come, what matters here is the undercurrent of presence. In other words, what really matters is the silent field underneath the words, which you can become aware of. For example, in the gaps between the words, there the silent field emerges, so to speak. It doesn't really emerge. You can become aware of it. Just the small gaps between words. And when you're aware of a gap between two sentences or two words, there's a gap in your thought stream, because you're paying attention to the gap of stillness. And that is the new state of consciousness that is now emerging on the planet, emerging in you. A state in which you are no longer trapped in mental noise, and a state in which you no longer have your sense of who you are, in the mental noise in the head. You don't derive your sense of identity any longer from thought, from the story that your mind is telling you who you are, the storyline of me and my life. We are going beyond that narrow, confined, personalized sense of self, which humans have lived in for so long. So it's a shift in identity that's taking place here. Humans have been trapped for many thousands of years in an egoic sense of self. And that consists of an accumulation of mental content. Humans have been a content-based species. That means deriving their sense of who they are from the content of their mind. Whatever the mind accumulates from an early age. It begins with your name. Your name, I call that the basket into which further experiences, further content is thrown and in which it accumulates. And then that basket, the basket is the name that you think you are, that your parents gave you. That becomes the receptacle for experiences that are accumulated, knowledge that is accumulated, successes, defeats, sufferings, relationships. All those things gradually form a whole that is the me, that is a mentally derived sense of self. I'll just ask you for a moment to imagine that you don't have a name. What that feels like. Not if you don't know who you are on the level of concepts. Let's just for a moment, if that is possible, imagine that that basket doesn't hold together anymore. What is there if you are not the name and that which is accumulated in that receptacle? And of course the name is just sounds. It's just sounds that come out of your mouth. Or if it's not pronounced, it is an image in the head. And that's me. And what is there when that goes? So you can't remember your name. And you're comfortable with not knowing your name. Then the experiences that have been accumulated on the conditioning doesn't quite hold together anymore. It's still there, but it's not a me. Things have happened where this form is. Things have happened to this form, but it's no longer a person there. Simply a field of awareness, which is what you are. And the story that you have been telling yourself in the head of who you are becomes unimportant. It does not give you an identity anymore. You don't derive your sense of self anymore from the story in the head, which is accumulated experiences, accumulated knowledge, and a sense of self derived from that accumulation. Content of the mind. And every experience is content. Everything that happens to you, some experiences become stored up, they become part of the accumulation, and they strengthen the sense of self. They are accumulated to enhance the sense of self. So when you live in that way, from a fictitious sense of self, you're always looking for things to enhance your sense of self, to strengthen it or to protect it, that sense of me. Because some of the content you might lose, or you want to add to who you are. Not the sense of not being complete is an essential ingredient of the fictitious sense of self. Everybody has that. And everybody interprets that as a personal problem. That very sense of not being complete becomes part of who you are and who you're striving to be. Haven't arrived yet. And even those people who are being told by the world that they have arrived have the feeling that they haven't arrived yet. And there's something wrong with the world. Must have gotten it wrong. They're telling me that I have made it, and I can feel that I haven't made it. And then you read about people who have everything, fame and fortune and good looks, and then they can't stop drinking, and they need to go from one psychiatrist to another. Have they made it? And in our culture, they are shown as examples of you too can achieve that. And everybody swallows that. And then the message that is there in the culture is that, yes, you can make it, because look at those people, they made it. If you meet them, you'll realize that they haven't made it at all. And some of them actually will come, they read the book. There's some famous people who loved The Power of Now, because they saw very clearly that what the world was telling them was not true, otherwise they would never have read it. What for? If you've made it, you don't need spiritual transformation. So it is wonderful. A few of those people who have achieved all possible worldly success realize that's not it either, and I still don't know basically who I am, and I wake up in the middle of the night in a state of dread and anxiety, and my relationships are continuously in chaos. And so to see that the attempt to complete yourself, to find a more complete and more fulfilled sense of self on the level of the story, that attempt is futile. Because on the level of the story that you are telling yourself in the head of who you are, you're not going to make it. No story has a happy ending. A few false happy endings, such as a wedding, that used to be the traditional happy ending on films and plays. But we all know that's a false happy ending. There's no happy ending because all your achievements are going to dissolve and you're going to die. And then no matter how many millions you have in the bank, it becomes meaningless. And what is left of every story is the 2-inch gap between your date of birth and date of death on your gravestone. The dash that contains all the sufferings, all the drama that was part of me and my story. And somebody derived their sense of self from all that. They thought that was who they were. It's sad. They never realized who they are. They were trapped in a fiction, their sense of identity trapped in a fiction for a whole lifetime. Maybe if they were lucky, shortly before their death or on their deathbed, the whole story collapsed and something else emerged, and that happens occasionally. Occasionally, as death approaches, maybe it's only a few minutes or a few hours away, there's suddenly, and some people who have been sitting with a dying person have reported that in certain instances something shines through suddenly. It's almost a light that comes through, and that happens when the mentally made sense of identity, the fictitious sense of identity, dissolves, because that is it heavily obscures the light of consciousness that is underneath. And it can happen shortly before death that fiction dissolves, and suddenly it's like a flowering. There's an enormous light shining through, as if a flower had just opened. And it could have opened before, but it opened and only a few minutes before death. But at least it opened. One could say the purpose of that life is fulfilled. But the message here is that you don't need to wait for your death approaching before you can know who you are beyond a mental image of who you are. You don't have to wait for death to approach, because you might not get it even then. You may be trapped in that image even as you die, and that means you would die in terrible, terrible fear and anxiety, because that image is dying, the me is dying. The transformation of consciousness that is happening to each one of you is that kind of death, but it is not the physical death. It's the death of what I call the me, or what in some spiritual traditions is called the self, which is a mind-made sense of self. That is dissolving. So really, why we are here is to undergo that death voluntarily. Well, partly voluntarily. Because if you hadn't gone through great suffering already due to being trapped in a mental image of me, which is a suffering sense of self, a sense of self that is unhappy a lot of the time. So you've been trapped in a suffering sense of self, and the suffering has become so acute that something within you said, this is too much. There must be something else. I can't go on like this. I'm saying this because that happened to me. So it looks as if you had chosen to come here, and that's fine, that's one perspective on it. But really, you were driven here because you want to die. You want to die that death of the self, the little me in the head, because that's not who you are. Now, the little me doesn't want to die, so there are two movements inside you. One is the movement towards liberation, and it's a very strong and increasingly powerful movement to become free of that. Something far vaster is emerging in you than even the heaviest and most dramatic story of me, than even the heaviest me could be, that thinks, oh, I'm so heavy. Nothing. You can sometimes see people, you say, well, there's no chance that they would ever become liberated in this lifetime. If you look at the heaviness of their drama and their total identification with the drama of me. But you might be wrong, because very often the most unlikely people suddenly step beyond. And perhaps the monk who's been practicing meditation for 30 years hasn't stepped quite beyond yet. There's still a me and mental image of me as the spiritual one. And there might be a criminal here in a prison cell whose sense of mentally made sense of self suddenly dissolves. And what emerges is great joy, aliveness, and peace, and a state of connectedness with being, a vastness which is not separate from you, is one with who you are, can only be expressed in paradox. It is you and yet much greater than you. So we are here to connect with that vastness that lies underneath the storyline of me. And we are allowing the story of me to come to an end. Your sense of identity is no longer derived from the content of your mind. Whatever thoughts go through your mind, you are no longer a thought-based entity. Thoughts still happen, but thoughts don't give you an identity anymore. Then thought is not problematic. The continuous stream of thinking is only problematic because your sense of self is trapped in it. That makes life extremely problematic, and every thought tells you how problematic your life is. I'm not complete. I need, I want, I must have. Where is it? To complete myself, I'm looking for myself. I want to add something to the content of me. It might be acquisition, it might be material things, it might be relationships, or it may be in higher developed humans knowledge. It is still the search, nothing wrong with knowledge, but here we are speaking of the self-seeking through knowledge, to seek a stronger sense of me through knowledge. And we've all met people whose sense of self is primarily identified with all their knowledge. They're people, if you go to universities, you meet many of them. I was there. In other places, the content that primarily gives you an identity might be appearance. It could be anything. It is amazing what that sense of self can use and does use to strengthen itself. From the smallest to the biggest, it's just like an animal, like maybe a pig that will eat almost anything and absorb it, and that's me. And it's not anything, even a miserable experience can be added to my basket of miserable experiences, and when my sense of self is predominantly unhappy, as is the case with many, with others it's half-half, happy, unhappy, happy, unhappy. In others it's predominantly unhappy, and they're telling everybody or themselves in their head their unhappy story and how they're trying to get out of it. For years they've been trying to get out of their unhappy story of me. But their primary sense of self, the content with which they are identified in the mind and in the emotional field, mental emotional content, is misery. So when that is the case, what they're looking for to strengthen their sense of self is a further piece of misery, because other things wouldn't fit in that basket. They would not be compatible with all these things that are in the basket. If it's predominantly misery, I'm looking for more misery, and myself gets even stronger, a more miserable self. But the ego loves that. That ego feels stronger in that. So the world is full of people who are looking for further unhappy experiences, mad as it might seem, to strengthen their sense of self. And you can sense it when you have certain sensitivity and presence, when you meet someone who has that very heavy sense of self that is predominantly identified with misery. And that, of course, the pain body comes in there, which we may address a little bit later. So it wants more of that. It will use anything to strengthen itself. The tiniest things, you all know these things that everybody does it seems. Things, name dropping, and that's just a tiny example of, I want to add something to who I am. Or I spoke to such and such, that famous man, the other day. Whether it's true or not, in many cases it's not true. Why is that? Because they want to add a bit more content to, maybe I can become a bit bigger. It's all a search for yourself. And it's a never-ending search on that level. And then you might come, when you go beyond name-dropping and go beyond deriving your sense of identity from your car, perhaps all of you have gone beyond that, well, some, then you may come to, the search may continue on another level. The search continues then on the spiritual level, which is also a search for acquisition to add to the sense of who I am. It could be in the form of greater knowledge. I want to understand the universe. What's it all about? The mystery. And I want to, and then image forms of me, the one who's gone beyond material things, the spiritual one. And you've all met people who are. And it happens so easily, because that tendency of image making and of needing to add to the content of me is so strong. Even seeking for answers means I want to add more content. There's nothing wrong with investigating or examining, but I'm speaking here now of doing that in the service of a self, to derive a greater self from that. And that's the delusion. So everyone is trapped in that seeking for a deeper, greater, stronger me, sense of self. It's never enough. It's definitely who you are now. Your story will tell you who you are now is not enough. The basket isn't full yet, or what it contains isn't good enough. I need to add better things to my basket, other things. And so I need the future. Without the future, I cannot be myself, is the delusion. I can only complete my sense of identity through having more future, enough future. Please give me more future so that I can know myself. Please give me time so that I can know myself. That is the mind pattern. Because for everything else you need time. Please give me time to make money. You need some time. Please give me time to learn a language. Give me time to find a mate. Give me time to make a cake. Everything requires time. And on that level, it's fine. You need it. Of course you need time for all those things. But then, if you then step into knowing who you are, give me time to know who I am, is the delusion. That's the beginning of the delusion, that you need time to find yourself. And when that is the delusion, your whole life then, once the delusion that you need time to find yourself is firmly established, and it happens quickly, then all further activities, all further action, all further thought, all further aims are colored and distorted by that delusion. And so they're all an expression of the delusion of needing to find yourself. All the desires and fears that dominate a person's life, that provide the motivating power behind what people do, the desires and fears, the basis for that is that mentally made sense of self. It fears that it may never become complete, or it might lose the little it has, and it desires more content in whatever form, some content. That's why spiritual traditions speak of desire, let go of desire. But I'm not saying let go of desire. Let's leave that for a while. Just look at desire. Why make another problem and say you should let go of desire? Just look at it and see how it operates. So and then you have what operates on the personal level, operates collectively. So that personalized sense of me that isn't complete and fulfilled and needs something, never happy with what is, it's not enough. Never happy with this moment, it's not enough, not good enough. The me is not complete. Always at odds with something or someone, which it likes, because then it feels I know more who I am when I'm at odds with something or someone than when I'm at peace. It doesn't like peace. It likes to be in conflict in one way or another, because then the me gets stronger in any kind of conflict or opposition. That's the contracted state of me. And these days many people have stress. What does that mean? It means you're in conflict with this moment. And that's again part of the whole civilization is a stressful civilization, because the whole civilization is an externalization of the human consciousness. So everybody is under stress, which means they're in conflict with what is. They don't want to be here because they need to be in the future. That's called stress. I need to be there. And you can actually see the reaching out, how stressful it is. It tears you apart. Never quite getting there. That reaching out to, and it's in people's faces. They can't be here because they need to be there urgently. And that sense of self likes that, because it feels stronger in that conflict. It contracts more. And then you have a pseudo substitute sense of self that at least now I know who I am, because you're in a fighting mode with life. You're in a fighting mode with the present moment, which is life. Whatever it is, I'm against it. What do you think about the present moment? I'm against it. It shouldn't be. And then that sense, you can see how it's so deep-seated that the discontent, the unhappiness that's part of that, the self. And the self does not want to be free of that. That's not where the longing for freedom comes from. The longing for freedom does not come from the self. The self speaks of freedom, but then sabotages it continuously. It says, I'm looking for peace, and then creates conflict. And then you can see how it operates collectively. The same mindset operates collectively. Let's have another peace conference. And in the meantime, they produce more and more massive amounts of weapons. So let's talk about peace. The peace process, they're still talking about peace process, and they're continuously throwing grenades and machine gunning, and the peace process. Talk about peace. Peace, they don't want peace because the mindset depends on non-peace for its survival. And so whether your sense of self is predominantly a personalized sense of self, or whether it's predominantly a collective egoic sense of self, a religion, or a nation, or a racial thing, then that can be even stronger than the personalized. It's exactly the same principle at work, exactly the same mechanism at work, but can be even more mad than the personalized sense of self, which is mad enough. But you can see how mad humanity can become when they identify with a collective me. That's the height of madness. And what they are capable of doing when the egoic sense of self is a collective one, then all the respectable citizens become monsters. And the criminals is harmless compared to that. And the crimes against humanity, criminals are not committed by criminals, they're committed by respectable citizens. And still are. Nationalistic, religious, whatever they are, whatever their mindset, whatever their mental image is, the mentally made sense of self, of us, they need their enemies. They need fighting. They need to be at odds with another nation, fighting another religion. Then I know who I am when I'm at odds with something. So it operates on all levels. Hence the madness of human history and the madness of everybody's life, just as my life was completely mad. I mean, when you look at the surface, it looks okay. They look as if they were sane. If you look at big cities, the running about like frightened chickens, it's not all that sane, but it's still just, when you look, you see that everyone's life is dominated by that conflict. So there's self-seeking through this, that, the other, to strengthen the sense of who I am. And that is the madness. Self-seeking through future. There's the madness. So if we can see the madness, that is the beginning of freedom. We already have one foot in freedom when we see the madness of self-seeking through future. Of self-seeking through further content. And that includes any question that arises in your mind at this moment. I want to know something more. Because in this transformation of consciousness, your understanding is relatively unimportant. The little that you need to understand, you've understood already. I just pointed to simply see the madness. Beyond that, what emerges, that state of consciousness that is emerging, you cannot really understand or figure out through the mind what that presence is. What do you mean by presence? Because that is a state of consciousness that is not based on content. The presence is, as I sometimes describe it, a spaciousness, a sense of space that surrounds whatever content there is in your life. Thoughts, emotions, sense perceptions or experiences, even sitting here and listening. The truth is not in the words. The words only point. So don't accumulate the words. You can't take the truth home with you, nor do you need to, because you are the truth. So the words only point to that spaciousness that is inside you. In that spaciousness, and so that spaciousness you bring to every sense perception. That spaciousness is there, you don't really bring it, you realize it's already there. For example, when you look at something, let's say it's the flowers, when you look at something and there's no mental noise around it, there's simply this perception of that. I recommend that practice highly, to look at a flower in the state of such alertness, relaxed alertness, that you don't need to label it in any way. The first thing you notice when you do that is how still a flower is. And I'm sure you never noticed that before when you looked at it through the mind. The mind has no knowledge of stillness. The mind is noise. So when you look at a flower, an amazing thing happens. The first thing you feel, of course you see the beauty, there's the color, and there's the light shining through the petals. It's very beautiful. But you notice more than that. You notice that it is very still. And anything in nature, you suddenly notice that there is an essence beyond that which you see. It lives in a state of deep stillness. And when you notice that, what does that mean when I say now you notice that? It means at that moment, that deep stillness is there in you. When you notice it in a flower, that a flower lives in that state. The noticing it is the arising in you of that state of stillness. And that is a state of great sacredness and aliveness and beauty, but deeper than the beauty of form. It is the formless that arises in you, the formless consciousness. So that is what I mean when I use the word spaciousness. Perhaps you didn't quite know what I meant. So we are gradually getting there. I'm giving you a few more pointers to what that means. There's a wake-up call. Nature here is so alive. All plants that have good karma come to California. And there's such profusion of plant life here. So anything to truly, a flower, a plant could be, you wouldn't need any more spiritual teachers. Any flower could be your teacher, and you wouldn't need any other teacher if you can truly be with a flower and be alert and watch. So the intelligence that created that flower and that beauty operates in complete stillness. It doesn't need noise. It doesn't need to have a committee meeting to find out how we can create a beautiful flower. Let's discuss it. Let's feed the information into the computer and let's talk about that, and let's break it up into little mathematical formula and okay, how can we, let's create a beautiful, something incredibly beautiful. Let's bring the most intelligent minds here on the planet and let's create something incredibly beautiful. And after a lot of noise making, they would never be able to create something like that. And it's, so the greater intelligence operates without noise. Only the human mind is an aspect of the vast intelligence, a tiny aspect that is noisy. And that's fine too if you're not seeking yourself in the noise. If you're seeking yourself in the mental noise, it's torture, it's a prison, it's awful. Otherwise, okay, the mind is a particular expression of intelligence and it is noisy. There's no problem there. And that's not who you are. It operates in you, no problem. You need it for certain things, it's helpful. For many, many things you need the mind, except for knowing who you are. Except, in other words, except for the most important thing in your life. For everything else, it's fine. And when you truly notice that a flower exists in complete stillness, it not only is still inside, you almost sense that it's surrounded also by stillness, a field of stillness, everything in nature. And it's beautiful. It's alive, but it's not noisy. So the noticing of that dimension is the spaciousness that is around the content in your life. And I've only given the example of the flower so far, but you will see that it applies to all the content in your life, to all your experiences. They happen. Let's now shift from the flower to a traffic jam. You're sitting in a car, stress. You need to be there, but you're not moving. So that is an experience. There's an experience of stopping, no movement. The same spaciousness that is, of course, easier to become aware of when you contemplate a flower, that event that we call the traffic jam, you can also notice that it is surrounded within the spaciousness, because that spaciousness is always the now in which it happens. So what you become aware of, there's the traffic jam, which otherwise would have irritated you tremendously and brought up anger or frustration or made the unhappy story of me even more unhappy. Instead, there's the traffic jam. And how do you find the spaciousness around that event? Simply by allowing that moment to be. The moment you say yes to anything that happens completely, instead of fighting or resisting what is, you become aware of a dimension that is deeper than the event. Now, whatever label I use for that, it doesn't matter. Just every label is just a little pointer. I can call it a spaciousness around it. A stillness in which it happens. And that, now next time there's a traffic jam, see what happens when you completely say, right, here I am, the car is not moving, it is as it is. And suddenly there's a stillness around the content. And then your next practice will be an emotion arising, anger arising. Maybe you didn't catch the traffic jam in time, so you became angry. Anger comes up. And here too, you can allow that, say, there's anger, here it is. Anger has a lot of energy to it. It is as it is. There's the energy that we call anger, trapped energy, like something trying to get out. It is as it is. No, it's not so easy here. It's easier to see the spaciousness, the silence around a flower than the silence and spaciousness around anger. But the same principle is at work. You can, anything that you allow, any form that arises, that you do not resist because you see the futility of resisting a form that has arisen. It is. What can you do? Of course you can, then action is possible, but in the meantime it is. So whatever arises in the now is completely accepted, and through that a deeper dimension suddenly reveals itself to you. And that I sometimes call the spaciousness around things, the spaciousness around whatever the content is. And then you can take the whole story in your head of me and my past and my life situation and see also that it's surrounded by spaciousness. Another word for that spaciousness is the now. What that means is you become aware of the now in which everything happens. Undoubtedly it does. It cannot happen anywhere else. Nothing can happen outside that field of now. Mostly people are not aware of the field. They're only aware of what happens in the field. Not only are they aware of what happens in the field, they are identified with what happens in the field of now, and they react to what happens in the field of now in their search for a self. In their search for a self, whatever arises in the field of now, they cling to or they run away from. There's an identification with content that happens, and there's complete ignorance of the vastness in which it happens. So you get trapped in form, and by reacting to every form that arises in the now, your own form identity gets stronger. The illusion that you are this psychological form with its story and this physical form gets stronger with every reaction to another form that arises. This is the secret of life, the mystery. When you see that, how that operates, and then you can see why the self needs the reactivity for its continued life. It perpetuates itself through reactivity, because every time you react to something, there is a strengthening of your form identity, the psychological sense of me. You can see it, how the me loves discussions, how the me loves to be right, and so you react to this person's opinion. You can even spiritually, maybe it happened to you this weekend. Somebody gave an opinion, and there was the reaction, saying, no, you're wrong, I know better. Maybe you do, but there's a self-seeking there, and there's a strong energy behind it, the reactivity. So most people go through life in that mode of reactivity. And whatever arises in the now, they react to, and most of the time it's a no. A form arises, and there's a subtle turning away from it. So to see that is the beginning of freedom. And then you see the miracle that happens when whatever form arises, it is not resisted. It's allowed. And that form could be an event, an external event. It could be a thought that comes in, or an emotion that goes through you. It's simply allowed to be. Because what's the point in saying no if it is? It's allowed. And there it is. That is the key word. Allowed means you're no longer a reactive entity. It doesn't mean that you cannot respond to what, if action is required, you respond, but not react. React is the conditioning, is playing itself out. The self is strengthening itself through the reaction. Response is action arises that is totally right for this situation, but it doesn't come unless you first say yes, and then action comes. There's enormous power in that yes. It is the power of life itself, the power of consciousness itself that is there. The moment you say yes to life, then the power of life is there and flows through you. Not egoic power that I want to know, I must have, or that a deeper, not power over some other form, but the power of life itself is suddenly there when you say yes to life. And saying yes to life is saying yes to now, this moment. And that, so, instead of going through life and reacting to the content that arises in your life continuously, new things, thoughts, emotions, external events, people, places, the scenery around you changes continuously. That's all content. Instead of reacting to content, the content is allowed to be, and then you're aware of instead of just being aware of, identified with what arises in the now, you become aware of the now itself, beyond the phenomena that arise in it. That is the miracle of transformation of consciousness. What does that mean? You become aware of the now itself. You become aware of an undercurrent of stillness in which everything happens. You sense it. Not only that, even that's not quite correct. You realize that you are it. And then it's so easy once you realize you are that deep undercurrent of stillness. The world is no longer problematic. That moment you know yourself to be that. Whatever content there is in your life, including the story in your head of me, is no longer problematic. It's simply the story of me. But you don't get your identity from it anymore. What's left are simply your photo albums, either physical photo albums or the photo albums in the head. Those things that happened to me, okay. Or video thing, these days people record things on video film. So you may have a collection there of 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That was me with my first wife, that's me with my second wife. And there's the third wife. You're not saying, no, that is all illusion. Of course there's your first, second and third wife or husband. But it's simply, okay, you're no longer in a reactive relationship to those events that took place in the past and are now remembered now, in the field of now. Where else can they be remembered? They're remembered in the field of now. You're no longer in a personalized and reactive relationship. You're not seeking yourself in your reaction to your 3 ex-wives or ex-husbands. Just one example. So those stories go, then you know what he did to me or she did to me, and I'll never forget what he did and said, and so on. It simply is things that happened in the past. Not me. There's no identity in it. You don't need it anymore for an identity. And the future is fine too. Of course you need future for many things. Nobody denies that. But you don't look for yourself anymore in it. You can't find yourself there, so it's no longer problematic. It's no longer threatening the future, nor is it all that promising. It just is. And you deal with it. You make arrangements for next week to do this or that, next year, going this or there, make appointments for the future, work out something that you're going to do without seeking an identity through it. Simple, effortless doing, not straining. Effort means really you're seeking yourself in something. Everything when you're seeking yourself in it is effort. And it's strain, and it's stress. Then, after that, life is so simple. And why is it so simple? I'm not saying no challenges will ever come anymore. Of course they come. Challenges are wonderful. But they are simple because they're only now. There's nothing that big that can come into the field of now. And the power is there to deal with it now, when you allow whatever arises to arise, and if it needs a response, if it needs dealing with, There is vast power that immediately flows through you, and action, you take action. A few people have experienced that in emergency situations, who suddenly did just the right thing, and people say, how could you have been so courageous to have done that? There was no thought involved. There was a greater power that took over. So, and then those people say, well, I don't know, I just did it. I don't know how it happened. They don't think that they did anything great because there was no me involved in it. Your whole life can be like that, simply by dwelling with your attention in the field of now, the field itself. Then let it happen. Let the world happen. It's great. Let the forms come and go as they will. No form stays for that long. Every form that comes and goes. Let it come. You enjoy the play of form around you. The fear of loss is no longer there, because why is there the fear of loss? Because there is an identification with some content, and there is the fear that if I lose that, I lose part of who I am. That's the fear of loss, whether it's fear of material loss, any kind of loss. That goes, so it's the end of fear. And you can see what a miraculous transformation that is when humans no longer live dominated by fear. My God. You can actually live in a state of joy and aliveness continuously, no matter what arises. Because what arises isn't that important. It's a form. It's short-lived. It's a play of phenomenal existence. The universe playing with form. Consciousness playing with form. Let it play with form. You yourself become a participant in the play of form. You can create without self-seeking. And then you create beautifully. But when you create and there's self-seeking in it, there's a negative energy field in that. I need, I want, I must have. Without that, I'm nobody. Oh, I mustn't lose that. And then there's competition. I need to fight him and her because he might get there before I do. And all the things that create our civilization goes. And the power of consciousness itself flows through you. It loves to create. So it'll create through you who knows what. You don't need to know it now. Let it flow. And then all there is left really in your life is the simplicity of this moment. And it's always quite simple. When you are no longer seeking yourself in past and future, then you can honor this moment and honoring, embrace the now, because it is life. It's an expression of life. You embrace what is. Yes. Through that embrace, you know the spaciousness that is around the form that is there. This is the new state of consciousness that is arising in humans. This is the end of a personalized sense of self. So you're only a person now on the surface, just as a matter of convenience and for practical purposes. You are still a person on the surface. But there's not an identity in that person. There's not a sense of self anymore that I need because you realize that there's the surface of you as a person, and you can keep your name even. You don't have to say, I'm no longer using my name. Nor do you have to say, when somebody asks you, what's your name, would you say, I have gone beyond name and form. Because self-seeking can come back in through the back door. And when you tell somebody that you have gone beyond name and form, you're actually telling them, I am very special. I'm more special than you. You still have a name. A while ago I asked somebody, I don't know why I asked it, I don't usually ask, when were you born, or where were you born? And he said, I was never born. Of course it's true, but when he said it, it wasn't true. So you don't become special, you become quite ordinary in that, as that new consciousness arises. It doesn't say, look at me, quite ordinary. The need to be special, which is part of the mentally made sense of self, and that's an essential ingredient of it. Please let me be special. If I cannot be special and be a great success, at least let me be special in my misery. Please let me be more miserable than other people. The need for specialness goes. It's wonderful. You can be quite... You don't need to be anybody in particular. You are the field of now. It's vast, it's alive. You are the spaciousness around phenomena. The need to stand out, to make an impression, isn't there. That even to strengthen your identity through having an opinion and telling somebody, words of course will still come out of your mouth, but not in a self-seeking mode. The need to be someone, look at me, that's the egoic need. Or it gets inverted. Some egos don't like to be looked at. Don't look at me. But really they want to be looked at. It's just the reverse. It is so simple. You sit here and you get it. And once you get it, what that really means is that it arises. And you have even a taste of it. You can never go back to the original madness for long. Because even to have a taste of this means, it has emerged. Of course it can become obscured again temporarily, and then you're back as a little me in the head, and with its problems. And you can easily see when you look in the mirror or you look at somebody else, the moment it becomes obscured, a veil goes down in front of your eyes, are like suddenly veiled, and there's a deadness suddenly that comes over people when they're trapped again in mind. And what the expression in their eyes is telling them, I don't want to be here. It's a basic ingredient. I want to be somewhere. This isn't it. Let's get somewhere else. Let's get to the future fast. Trapped in thought, trapped in mental noise. Now, mental noise, of course it'll still be there in you. Mental noise has a momentum. It's been there for 500,000 years. It has a certain momentum. So occasionally your mind may still be noisy, and then you see, there's so much noise. Look at all that noise in the head. You're no longer trapped in the noise. Even there can be a spaciousness around that. I'm full of mental noise, and that's okay. Even that you can allow. If that's the case at this moment, all right, let there be mental noise. Go on, let there be mental noise. And you'll be amazed how quickly you go beyond it, beyond anything that you allow completely. Oh, I'm so unhappy with my life. Okay, be unhappy. Let me be unhappy. I say okay to my unhappiness, it's fine. I allow myself to be unhappy. I'm unhappy. I say yes to my unhappiness. It's not that bad to be unhappy. See what happens if you do that. I don't mind being unhappy. It's miraculous. The power of surrender, that's really what it is. The power of the yes that you bring into the no. The no still has a momentum. The no to what is predominantly, and it has a momentum. So it will appear and reappear inside you, unless the miracle of radical transformation happens to you here and now as you sit here. That's possible too. In some cases it happens. That once and for all, the no dissolves and never returns. It can happen, it's very rare. Usually you have to suffer dreadfully for that to happen. So you're not suffering perhaps quite enough here. Mostly, the no still has a certain momentum. And you will know the no when it happens. You will be able, because presence is arising, all that is required of you is to see that you are in the no modality, in the no mode of consciousness in any moment. There's an inner tightening, there's an inner contraction, and there is a monologue or a dialogue in your head that complains about this moment and says, this shouldn't be happening, no, I don't want this, I want that. Or the no is a more subtle thing, it's disguised as, okay, well, there's something more important that I need to get to, and this isn't the moment I'm interested in. I need to get there. I'm not interested in now, I'm interested in then, there. That's very habitual, and that's a disguised no, because it's not an obvious no, it's simply a denial of now, because the future is regarded as more important. Whether it's the next minute, or tonight, or this weekend, or in a few years when I will have made it, it doesn't matter. The future is regarded as more important, and that is a subtle no, a disguised no to what is. I need to get to the future. And again, of course, it's connected with the self-seeking. I need to become somebody in the future, a bigger self. Some presence, you cannot see it, you become the no. As most people still are in this world, they are walking no's. But there's enough presence in you. Many of you have been here the whole weekend, and presence is arising anyway. There's enough presence in you to recognize the no when it happens. And not to fall into the error of superimposing another no on that no and saying, you see, I shouldn't be in that contraction, I'm doing it again. You see, it's no good, it just doesn't work for me. No, that would be a no on top of the no. When you see a no in whatever form it comes to this moment, you recognize it's a no. And you recognize it's some form of tightening or contraction. And what do you do then? You say, oh, okay, that's how it is. There's the contraction. There's the no again. Let it be. Let the contraction be. And see what happens. So you bring the yes into the no. The yes into the no. That's all you need. It's very simple. Nothing is rejected and denied or complained about. Nothing that is, inside or outside. And then more and more you know who you are beyond that which arises in the now. You're no longer looking for yourself in that which arises, whether it be an event, a thought, an emotion, a sense perception, anything. You know yourself to be the field in which it arises, or the spaciousness around all the content, all the events in your life. You are that. And that's a state of peace, no matter what happens. There's always, because that undercurrent is peace itself. And it's you, it is the essence of who you are, which is not separate from the essence of your partner, your person next to you, anybody, or any form. And the miracle is, once you know who you are, and you cannot necessarily say anything about it. It's a miracle that I can say so much about it, something that cannot be spoken of. Once you know who you are, you know your own essence, then you know the essence in every other form, life form, because you are one in your essence with every other life form. And then you look at the flower and recognize your own essence in the flower. And then you look at a cat and recognize your own essence in the cat. And then you look at another human being and you may have to pierce through layers of mental ego stories, mental noise, the veil, and you pierce through it. Just stay alert and you look, you can ignore the story and all that. You look and then you know the essence of that human being is who you are. You know every life form as yourself, manifested in a different form, because the universe or consciousness likes the play of form. That's the beauty of the manifested universe. And you know yourself to be the unmanifested one life before it is born into a form. The one life before it becomes something or someone. The one life after a form dissolves. The timeless one consciousness. If God has any meaning, that is what it is. So, self-realization and God-realization, of course, the same. The only place God can be known is in yourself as your own essence, not separate. As Jesus already said, the kingdom of heaven is within. It's not there in space or time. So you know God. That's how it is. If you don't like the word, drop that word. It's only a word. Don't get entangled with any word. And so, when you know each life form as yourself, that is called love. And that is an essential part of the new consciousness. You are then continuously in a state of love. Not the egoic so-called love that says, I can't live without you, don't you ever leave me. Not that kind of love, that's clinging. No, the love that knows the other as yourself. It's so simple. And love your neighbor as yourself. Because the teaching of Jesus only exists in fragments that people have written down. Jesus was pointing to a state of consciousness that is possible for humans, that is emerging here now, which he sometimes called the kingdom of heaven. And what he said was, I wasn't there, but I know what. The essence is timeless. It speaks the truth no matter, it's always the same. Once you know the essence, you know what they said. Even if you get a mistranslation, you still know what they said. What the essence speaks. Know, in that new state of consciousness, you know your neighbor to be yourself. You love your neighbor as yourself when you know your neighbor to be yourself. So you love your neighbor, not, he didn't mean as you love yourself, but as yourself. because your neighbor is yourself. And of course, people have been trying to love their neighbor as unsuccessfully for so long, because they didn't realize the depths of the teaching. They thought all we have to do is to obey a few commandments and do as he tells us. But the depth was that it was pointing to a completely new state of consciousness. And you cannot practice the fruit of the new state of consciousness in the old state of consciousness. And that's why the discrepancy comes that Christianity has a history of violence. Amazing. But the truth is there, hidden, simple, very simple. This is the now. It hasn't changed. Never will change. We are moving beyond thought. There's a book by Krishnamurti which is called The Awakening of Intelligence. And really, this is what it is. But intelligence, not as defined by academic textbooks, is not the intelligence that can be measured in IQ tests. All that IQ tests measure is your ability to solve little puzzles. Intelligence is so much vaster than that. And that is what is arising here and now. An intelligence that operates noiselessly. That does not exclude thought. The vastness of it includes thought, but it's far beyond thought. Thought is small. But thought, even thought, can be inspired, informed, and energized by that vast intelligence when thought is no longer trapped within itself, when a self is identified with thought. Thought is like a knot, K-N-O-T. You have tied yourself into a knot. Intelligence cannot flow through freely. This is the untying of the knot in both senses of the word. The no to life and the knot is being untied. Then the vaster intelligence can move through, and it can even express itself through the mind. You can speak from that state of still presence. It then will, the energy of that field then flows into the words, and the words are empowered. Of course, they are not new. Very rarely does it happen that one creates new words, nor is it necessary. Every word is old. It has a history. There's nothing you can do about that. Every thought, most thoughts is conceptual, words. It's old, it has a history. And yet, when a word arises out of that vastness, not the prison of a little mind, self-serving mind, a mind that is now open to the influx of the greater intelligence, then the mind can also be inspired by that. It can then give form, and it will creative forms, new forms. There's a freshness and newness and aliveness and a power to the forms that the mind then gives birth to, because the mind becomes aligned, one with the vastness of intelligence, as it did with every creative person in the world. Every creative person somewhere in their field of creativity were aligned with the greater intelligence. Not usually in their whole lives, but here our whole lives are becoming transformed by that. So I've been speaking for a long time. Words have been coming out of my mouth, this mouth, and yet the words came out of the field of presence. Of course, they are old words, but there is a power to those words that goes beyond the informational value of the words. That has its place too. The words point to the truth. They have a certain informational value. You can then see where madness is, and you can see where the end of madness is. The informational value of words, but the words that are spoken from presence have an energetic quality to them which comes from the vastness of presence or consciousness. They are, so to speak, charged with the energy of that. And that's why it's beautiful to sit here and listen to the words that are spoken by presence. As the words, you listen to the words are being decoded by your mind. The mind extracts the meaning from the words, but that is not the end of the words. Then the words go deeper into yourself, and what's left of the words is the energy of presence that they carry. They become carriers of that, and then they awaken the presence in you. They go in. So you can drink in. When words are spoken from presence, you can drink in those words, and after a while you cannot even bother anymore with the information level of the words. That's why some people come to all my talks. They don't hear anything new anymore, nor is it necessary. But there's an awakening through the energy quality of the sound of the words of presence. And that's the beauty of spiritual discourse, and that's the power of spiritual discourse. Spiritual discourse does not come from a person, does not come from accumulated knowledge. And you know it when you hear it. You can sense the power, something within you responds. It is a self-recognition. The words have an energetic quality to them. That's why we've been here and you've been listening. Now, if you were only here as a mind, if the screen of mind as you are sitting here had been so dense that all that you could get from sitting here was the informational value of the words, but the screen of mind might have prevented you from allowing these words to sink more deeply into yourself, then it's not all that interesting after a while. You sit here and say, okay, I've heard enough now. I've taken a few notes. I could have read this in books, perhaps. Yeah, it was interesting, but now what's the next thing? Where's the next interesting bit of information? That's the mind. Let's go on to the next bit. There's a little gap now. Gaps are good. Whatever arises in you as sense experience, as you go out of here, things that arise from within. Allow it all so completely that you can sense the now itself in which it happens, as yourself. That's the secret, the open secret. Thank you. In the ancient scriptures of India called the Upanishads, there are some beautiful lines that illustrate what we've been talking about. And it goes something like this. Not that which the eye sees, but that whereby the eye can see, know that alone to be Brahman, the eternal, and not what people here adore. Not that which the ear hears, but that whereby the ear can hear, know that alone to be Brahman, the eternal, and not what people here adore. Not that which the mind thinks, but that whereby the mind can think. Know that alone to be Brahman, the eternal, and not what people here adore. It goes on a bit, I've forgotten the rest. And that's a beautiful illustration. Not what people here adore, not God or your essential nature is not something, not content, not form. The best description through words is to say not what it is not. And then you're left with what it is, which cannot be named, but can be known, but cannot be known conceptually, because every concept is again a name and a form. It can be known simply, easily, in the silent space of stillness, which is in everyone, underneath the mental noise, no matter how heavy and turbulent the mental, emotional noise may be, no matter how heavy the egoic sense of self is, in everyone, as their essential nature, is the stillness of pure consciousness, your essential nature, the essence, your essence, not separate from the essence of the universe. Are these just words? Yes, the words point to that. They cannot encapsulate that. They cannot explain, not even attempt to explain. If a question arises in you that says, please explain a bit more, I don't quite get it yet, it is not possible to, these are pointers. The analysis of pointers is pointless. But the mind wants to have content, so it will ask questions about the pointers, instead of allowing the pointers to point. It wants to analyze the pointer, the signpost. Let's look at this signpost. Let's examine it. Let's get out the microscope. So, what I'm saying, the mind cannot get. Allow the statement to work in you as a pointer, not as an explanation of the universe, because there can be none. But it can work, like those beautiful words of the Upanishads, or whatever words arise here, pointing to the dimension of the formless one life that is you. So what really it is pointing to, all these words point to, is that dimension of stillness within, that is vibrant with life but still, extremely awake but still, underneath thoughts, in between thoughts, in between words, is the canvas on which the whole phenomenal existence is painted. If you try to understand it, you won't get it. You have to relinquish even that, the desire to understand it, because that is an obstacle. That is still the mind. You're getting deeper, where you give up trying to understand. You give up even the pursuit of knowledge, the desire to analyze, to possess another piece of knowledge. And then, as Gangaji said yesterday, and then put it away somewhere in a drawer. Okay, now I've got the mystery of the universe. What's the next thing? And that stillness is not ignorance, it only looks like that from the point of view of the mind. It looks as if you were moving into the realm of ignorance and not knowing anything anymore. And that's why the mind doesn't want to go there. The egoic sense of self doesn't want to go there. And yet, this is the new state of consciousness that's emerging. And it's not ignorance, it's intelligence. Silent intelligence. And our whole civilization, one could say, is trying to run away from that, from the stillness. Because it's threatening to the mentally created sense of self, the image of me. It is noise. It's noisy, it's telling stories. It's identification with form. There's a question here. I have more than 50 questions. It says, if space is the body of God, as I use that pointer in the book somewhere, no more than a pointer. If space is the body of God, what's the devil? Is there such a thing? Or another question there is a question about the nature of evil. Is there such a thing? There's identification with form. Is that if evil is anything, it's simply the ignorance of not knowing who you are and identifying with a temporary form, and therefore fighting other forms that you think are also separate forms around you and threaten your form, or you want to dominate other forms or get something from other forms. Identification with form, the psychological form of me, the story in my head, the image, self, and identification with me as this physical form. That is not knowing who you are. And that creates whatever then action arises out of that state of illusion, creates suffering for yourself and others. And we could call that evil. Yeah. It's also ignorance. Jesus on the cross didn't say, "You evil ones, what did you do to me?" He said, "They know not what they do. Forgive them, they know not what they do." So whether you see it as a factual or symbolic, it doesn't matter. The truth of crucifixion would be the essence of evil is there, it seems, and yet Jesus doesn't call it evil. He says, they know not what they do. So ultimately, what we perceive as evil arises out of the ignorance of who you are, which is ultimately the ignorance of not knowing God. And that's one and the same. I'll start with one or two questions that can be answered quickly. They're not really in order, just... I may not be able to answer 50 questions. There's enough here for another book or two. If your questions are not answered, then buy the next book, and it may be there. And if you derive some sense of self from whether your question is answered or not, you can watch that. Buddhists talk about true realization as emptiness, while you use the term being. Are you not speaking of the same realization? Yes. That was an easy one. I sometimes, more recently, have been using also, as you know, the word spaciousness, which gets close to emptiness. Ultimately, emptiness is consciousness without thought. Beautiful. This really is what stillness is. The beautiful state of being, what I call sometimes presence, simply being present. And we talked earlier about watching a flower in that state of simple presence. And then the stillness arises. You realize that flower is so still and very alive. And the whole beauty of it has come into being through the stillness. It's even surrounded by stillness. If you approach it with your mind, you can't know that. So you bring a stillness into your perceptions. You perceive through stillness, especially nature. You miss the sacredness when you do not perceive nature through stillness. You miss both the sacredness that is in nature and your own sacredness when you bring the noisy mind into nature and when you bring all your knowledge into nature. That has its place. For certain things your knowledge is necessary, but not for what really matters. To be able to put aside the accumulated knowledge and simply enter that state of alert presence that is still and yet awake and alert. And so you perceive the world through stillness, not all the time perhaps, but often the stillness will be there. And there's a depth now to everything, even to what you perceive, because you perceive a deeper essence in every form, because the stillness is what the Buddhists call the emptiness, what I sometimes call the spaciousness. It is being before it becomes beings. And a blessing comes with whatever is perceived. A blessing falls on everything that you perceive through stillness. And we can do that right here. To be here in a state of such simplicity that even the desire to understand is put aside. The mystery cannot be understood. It can be known beyond concepts as yourself, but it cannot be understood or become an object of knowledge. There's only one thing here to learn, not even to learn, because learn would mean as if you had to acquire something. The state of presence, the state of thoughtless awareness, the state of stillness, in which you are connected with intelligence itself, but you no longer need to rely on accumulated knowledge. It can be used still, of course, but you are connected with something much deeper and more vibrant, with yourself ultimately. You are yourself then. Instead of running to the future to find yourself, you continuously dwell in that sense of being. It is fulfilled and fulfilling every moment. I'm giving you now a positive teaching as opposed to the negative, what you are not. It is fulfilled and fulfilling every moment. The aliveness even goes into the body. You feel the aliveness in every cell of the body, of the joy of aliveness and of being. And oftentimes there will be no need to think. What is there to think about? There's so much aliveness and beauty. Be connected with that stillness. And look at the beauty around you, or simply all the beauty that's within you. The essence of beauty that is a form, external form, is in you as being, as the essence of being. So even if you were in a prison cell and you can't find any beauty, or you would probably see beauty even in the wall, but essentially you would find the essence of all beauty within yourself, in your very being, as the joy of simply being. Stillness, alert presence. What kind of civilization would humans create if the majority of human beings lived in that state? It would be a kind of heavenly realm, same planet, which potentially is heaven. It's only with the humans that have put so much concrete and poison on it that it's almost becoming hell. But it still is potentially heaven. So all you learn here is either to get a glimpse of that state or to go deeper. If in many of you it has already emerged, and it's simply a question of a deepening that happens, to dwell there more fully, more deeply, or to allow it to emerge more fully, whatever perspective you choose on it. What did Jesus say? Take no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Take no thought. That's the old translation. In the new translation it says, don't be anxious about tomorrow. In the old translation it says, take no thought. And I'm told that in Old English, to take thought meant to be anxious. It's very wise. Because the majority of thought is problem-making, worry. What's the next? To be free of thought, the compulsion to think, not the ability to think. You can think beautifully and clearly when you're free of thought. When you're free of thought, that means you're no longer run by thought, by the mind. You're no longer dominated. Your sense of self is no longer in thought. And then thought can operate beautifully when it's needed, but only when it's needed. The rest of the time, there's that simplicity of stillness, and occasionally fragments of thought come in, never problematic, like clouds passing by. Just a little bit of noise passing through, a little bit more, and yet there's always the stillness. We are here simply not to learn anything new, to encounter that dimension in ourselves. And many of you are encountering it now, and some of you not yet. And to those of you who are saying, well, it all sounds very nice, but how do I get there? Use a portal, which could be the feeling of your inner body, which takes your attention away from thought. Remember, when you are not thinking, you are more intelligent, more awake, more alive than when you are thinking. The difference is such that the thought state, the state of thought identification, is like sleep or dreamland. And then you awaken out of thought. This is why traditionally in many spiritual traditions the term awakening is the key word. In Buddhism, the very root of Buddha means the one who is awake. In Jesus' teaching, many parables are about being awake. To be free of, more recently, their spiritual teachings, Krishnamurti's teaching, can be summarized in 2 words, which he never did. He must have had his reasons. I love Krishnamurti, a great love and for the teaching and the power of what the teaching it's very extremely important in the evolution of consciousness, and really what's happening here is the same continuation, no more, no less. Oh yes, summarizing, he never said it, but really it says, don't think. All he said was, let's investigate the nature of thought. Can thought take us there? Let's look into it. Because he taught in the negative tradition, like Buddhism, for those of you who know him. So, and that is more, many of the teachings take you, even the Course in Miracles, which some of you know, which is the one channeled work that I love, there may be 1 or 2 others, it consists of words, pages and pages of script, and yet all designed to, when you get towards the end, to take you into the region of stillness, when words are no longer needed. So it meets you where you are in the noise, and then takes you by the hand out of the noise. And for some people it works. But here there's not even a method. There's no practice. There's no exercises here. There's simply the power of presence teaching directly, presence emanating, and that works for those who are ready for it. And then you don't need the intermediary step of a practice or a teaching. If you have one, it's fine. But presence is emerging directly now. Thoughtless awareness. Ramana Maharshi, whom many of you know, who lived in the first half of the 20th century, highly respected, great Indian teacher, when asked by someone, how can we judge whether we are making any progress on the spiritual path? How can we know it? He said, the degree of absence of thoughts is your measure of progress on the spiritual path. And this is an insult to the mind. Sitting here is an insult. The mind says, how dare you? I've been cultivating thought all my life. I have 2 degrees. My whole identity is lodged in thought. I'm so much more clever than most people. And you're telling me to stop thinking? You're telling me to be stupid? Now, you cannot make yourself stop thinking. Unfortunately or fortunately, it doesn't work. You can't make yourself stop thinking unless presence that arises in you is already of such power that thought simply stops. And then it looks as if you were making yourself stop thinking. This presence, the mind stops. But the quickest way to thoughtless awareness is, and it always comes back to that, to surrender to the now. Because the whole compulsion to think is to do with not surrendering to now, to life. That's why the mental noise, the mind is so active. It's always trying to get away from it now. Why? To uphold the mind-based sense of self. Accept this moment completely. Then very quickly a stillness and a peace emerge, no matter what this moment contains. Whether you live in a palace, or in a prison, or in a mansion, or in a little hut, makes no difference. Or whether your life situation, as I call it, the external circumstances of your life, whether everything is just crumbled around you, or whether you've just won the lottery, it makes no difference. Although it's more likely that you will get it when everything is just collapsed around you than when you've just won $1 million, because that can prolong the illusion a little bit more, not a lot more. I avoid the now by sleeping. I am the one that snores in the room right now. Can you help? Please speak loudly. Well, I don't know if you're awake at this moment, but You could give the person sitting behind you permission to be a Zen master and hit you when you drop off. That's what they do sometimes. The Zen master walks around with a stick. And after you've been hit, you go, thank you. Whatever works. Staying awake. Many times this question has been asked in one form or another. If we just allow, how will anything get done? What about initiate? Thank you. Now, this is a frequent misunderstanding of the state of allowing what is to be, allowing the now to be instead of complaining about what is, having an inner resistance to what is, trying to deny or get away from it, not facing what is fully. And it is true that most action that takes place is because people need to get to some future point where they hope that they find salvation by being fully themselves when they reach that point in the future. So they're trying to get away from now. That's the motivating force behind most activities in our civilization, is to try and get to the future, to some other point where it's going to be better, I will be more fully alive, myself, will have found myself. Ultimately, really, it's finding God or myself, and yet they are missing the now. So out of dissatisfaction and discontent and denial of what is, which is life itself, inseparable from now, they run towards the future, to an imagined or projected now that is going to be fulfilled and better. And that provides the action for building up a whole civilization. And then that is karmic action, because every action that arises out of that state of dissatisfaction and denial of life is, one could say, almost poisoned. And that's why in our activities, in creating all that wealth on the material realm, we have also created an enormous amount of poison. It's strange, isn't it? If you look at it in a fresh way, there are humans and they are continuously producing so much poisonous substances. Everywhere on the planet, these poisonous substances. That's because every action they take is tainted with the dissatisfaction and the denial of life now. So, and then it looks as if when I accept fully the now, am I able to take any action? Or am I going to be completely stuck in this moment, the way it is, if I don't resist it in some way or another? And I give the example in the book of somebody who is stuck in the mud. Can't get out of this mud. No, you could be in a state of great unhappiness, and then you would be struggling and getting angry about being stuck in the mud, and it becomes part of your story in the head. It's just the last straw. This is what I needed. Getting stuck after all this. It's typical, isn't it? Always happens to me. I'm repeating what my mind used to do, by the way. It just always happens. These things always, all the bad things happen to me. And so there's anger, and in your anger you're struggling and you're getting even more deeply into the mud. And then there's the state of, okay, this is what is. I'm here, stuck in the mud. No denying that. It's the simplicity of this moment is, here I am, stuck in the mud. All right, that's how it is. No, I don't want to be stuck in the mud for the rest of my life, so now I start moving. Oh, yes. Completely different energy comes because you've said yes, a power comes in and perhaps you will see a way out. There's a branch hanging there and you pull yourself out of the mud, which you hadn't seen before. Just a small example, you will suddenly, life will become supportive and cooperative because you haven't denied the now. You will get out more easily, more quickly, without it becoming incorporated into an unhappy me story. So action you take on the basis of acceptance of now is far more powerful than action that arises out of denial of now. Action that arises out of denial of now is poisoned and will have many karmic effects. Action that arises out of the state of acceptance has no poison to it, no side effects, and it's far more powerful. So, and this operates on all levels. And you always look, what is it that is required? What does this moment require? Okay, I'll initiate that. I'll apply for a job. I'm sitting here, I'm running out of money, $10 left in my pocket. Okay, and you go into stillness, that's how it is. There's $10, and here I am breathing, feeling my inner body. What action can I take? And then action comes, oh, let's look. Let's look at the paper, let's do this, pick up the phone, make a call. It comes not out of fear or a need to, simply it arises out of a peaceful state. Peaceful action is much more powerful than angry action or self-seeking action. So you will not become a passive vegetable by accepting the now. Vegetables are beautiful, but it's not for humans to revert back to the vegetable realm, of course. Vegetables exist in no thought. The whole vegetative realm, as well as animal realm, are all beautiful expressions of consciousness, but without thought, without the mental noise that humans are trapped in. So it's beautiful for them. They exist prior to thought, one could say. We cannot return to that. We cannot revert back to pre-thought. We sometimes try to. If we can't stand the torture of our minds anymore, we try to go back to pre-thought by having 5 whiskeys. And that often works. It takes you gradually below thought. So there is a kind of liberation there too, but it's not where humans are moving to. The state of presence is you rise above thought, in which thought can still operate beautifully when it's needed. But you no longer have your home in thought. This is an important question here. Many of you may have that or similar question. What suggestions, if any, do you have for individuals who are working in a profession or occupation where left brain rational thinking is constantly required? Well, I was in such a profession, and I must admit that I left. Perhaps it wasn't absolutely necessary. I didn't have a teacher, so I just thought I was working on a PhD as heavy mind stuff, and it became completely pointless. So it abandoned me, or I abandoned it. And then I spent 2 years on a park bench. Now, this is not the way you need to go. Don't be frightened. I've heard of several people who have read the introduction to my book where I mentioned the park bench and said, "Oh no, I don't want to read anymore." Many people have to work with computers these days, which also stimulates thought and left brain activity. And it pulls your attention out of the body onto the screen. A lot of energy goes out of your eyes, energy loss, if you stare at the screen for several hours a day. The question is whether your present occupation, profession, activity is compatible with the state of presence that arises. And many activities are compatible still with the state of presence. Even the use of computers is compatible with the state of presence if you simply remember to take enough space or spaciousness during the day. You have moments when you withdraw attention from the screen or from whatever activity, or you might be on the telephone a lot, talking about the stock market or whatever, is it going up or down and points and so on. And the energy field that surrounds you may be agitated, which is very normal these days. There's the nervous energy field in which you may have to live every day. Let's get to the next thing. Where's the next thing? It's whole, and even in places that should be places of healing, they are dominated by this mad nervous energy, like hospitals and schools. Hospitals, everybody running around. And there's the tension, the anxiety, even in jobs that used to be the most comfortable jobs you could get, like school teacher. Nowadays, they're most stressful jobs you can find. So there's the level of agitation, nervous tension and stress has been increasing. The question is, can I bring presence into that? Can presence emerge even here? In many cases it can, especially, and this is why, and I will be going into that, there are several questions about being in the body. Use that during the day. This means attention is taken away from thought, and when you feel the inner body, you feel that there is a spaciousness in the body. And for a moment, mind activity subsides. You connect with the inner spaciousness and aliveness that's in every cell of the body. And you do that for a minute or two, and then you go back to your normal activity. And then you withdraw again after a little while, maybe once an hour, it doesn't matter, whatever possible. When you're going up and down the elevator, bring in gaps so that you're not dragged along by a mind stream, an agitated mind stream, the whole day long, dragged from one thing to the next. One thing, this needs doing, and now this, and now that, and you're always catching up and never quite managing to catch up. This is how most people's working life is. So you don't get dragged along by a mind stream which is externalized, the collective mind stream of your company or your institution, your workplace. So if you can bring presence into that by periodically withdrawing for brief moments into the body and then gradually learning that you can be engaged in certain even left brain activities and still have some attention in the body. For example, when you listen to someone on the telephone. Attention in the body could be, you may not be able to feel the entire energy field of the body in an agitated work environment. Just, it sounds too simple to be true, but just take your attention into one part of the body and hold some attention in there while you listen on the phone, for example. And the hand is for many people the quickest access point to the body. There are two good access points that operate for most people. One is entering with your attention, enter the hand, left or right. And for those of you who don't even know what I'm talking about, because your attention has been in the head for so many years, if you hold your hand, and you can tell this to anybody who is asking you, and even people who have no interest in any spiritual book, many people will be ready to listen when you talk to them about connecting with the inner energy field of the body. You don't even have to tell them that it takes your attention away from thinking. They might become frightened. Just say it's good for you, it's good for the body, it feels good, which is all true. It's very healing, which is all true, to inhabit the body. You begin to inhabit the body by simply feeling the energy field in one of your hands, and you can hold it up. If you can't feel anything yet, the quickest way to feeling the inner body is holding up either your left or right hand, not moving it, closing your eyes, and then asking yourself a question. And the question is, without opening my eyes, without moving my hand, how can I know whether my right hand is still there? Now the mind may try to find, it may say, come up with some conceptual answer and say, well, I don't know. But you have to go more deeply. How can I know? That question draws your attention into the right hand, because to find out how you can know, your attention will go from thought, thinking about your right hand, to sensing your right hand from within. And after a while, with your eyes closed, you say, oh, yes, I can feel something. There is a certain aliveness there. That must be my right hand. It feels quite good. It's actually alive. And you can then learn to hold your attention there for a while. Hold it in your right hand. That means you've entered the body. And then say, okay, let's see if the left hand, I can also feel that. Yes, left hand is there, no doubt, I can feel that also. And then you bring together the feeling of left and right hand into a single feeling of hand. You no longer have an image in your mind of left and right, because your attention is completely on that feeling of aliveness. And you bring together left and right into a single feeling of hand. First you feel them simultaneously. Eyes open or closed, doesn't matter. And then you bring it together. To bring it together, it's easier with your eyes open. Simply there's a sense of hand, and then even that label drops, and there's simply an aliveness. there. And so if you can be in your hands, you can be in other parts. Gradually from there, put your attention into arms. Not quite as strong, the feeling, but they're there. And your feet, aliveness there. Your legs, there's an aliveness there. So gradually you bring together different parts into a single sense of aliveness. You inhabit the body. That means your mind is slowing down considerably, because attention is being taken away from thought. And there's a spaciousness in the body. And that simple thing can be your anchor for presence when you are in an environment that is nervous and agitated and mind-dominated. As much as possible, go into the body. You might be walking into a committee meeting with lots of egos around, and whatever, people demanding this or that, and you sit there, you listen to their demands, and you feel an aliveness, either in the entire energy field of the body that comes after a while, or just one part is enough. Feel your right, that can keep you sane. Simply feeling your right hand can keep you sane in a mad environment. So you're bringing in presence. And so instead of leaving, let this world be transformed by people, as if possible, bring presence into where you are. And so the world, instead of people leaving, although if you have to leave, you will leave. If you find it impossible to bring presence into that environment, you will have to leave. In most places now, I would be able to just be present no matter what, but there are a few places I know I wouldn't stay. I don't want to give any examples. If I worked I'll give one. If I worked in a discotheque for 6 hours every night, being bombarded by heavy noise, I would leave. That wouldn't be the job. If somebody chained me there to that place, I would surrender and there would be deep peace. But if I'm not chained to that place, I would leave. So as presence arises, it's not so much anymore of trying to figure out what you need to do. As presence arises, what you need to do will become obvious as a sudden insight with which you may wake up one morning and you know what it is that you need to do, and you do it. There's no longer any doubt. It is so clear. Those insights arise out of presence. So whether you have to leave or change, whatever it may be, you will know what you have to do beyond mental, agonizing mental decision-making and doubt. Should I, shouldn't I? On the other hand, but what if then, how am I going to make a living? Many of you will be taken out of your habitual surroundings. Presence will take you out, and others will stay where you are and transform your environment, because you are then there as a field of presence. In your family or in your relationship, some of you will walk out of the relationship if the partner is not ready for presence. You will walk out, or he or she will leave you. But you cannot predict whether or not your partner is ready for presence. The most unlikely people, seemingly unlikely, are ready for presence. So who knows? The beautiful thing is that presence will begin to operate in your life, and it will transform what is around you, either take you away or transform where you are. You're transformed. And this could be your family environment too, because just as many workplaces are agitated and nervous energy fields, many homes are equally agitated and nervous energy fields. If you walk into some homes, they're like madhouses, with screaming and shouting and never a sense of allowing this moment to be. Every member of the family is out of their bodies, completely trapped in thought and trying to get away from the now. Imagine a family living in that way. And you teach children what presence is. Not by words, by being present. By giving them space, by surrounding them with space. When they come in shouting this and that, you know what happened in school? You welcome that moment in which this child appears, and you embrace this moment, and the child appears in this now. And there's, as I call it sometimes, you give him or her space to be. You allow this person to be, and you listen in that sense of spaciousness, just listening. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Not wanting to change anybody. And here, pain bodies are important. As several questions here about the pain body. Pain body, as you know, is accumulated emotional pain from the past. It is an aspect of the self. Pain body is an aspect, an important aspect of the egoic sense of self. Pain body is not always active. Pain body has dormant periods and active periods. When it is dormant, the sense of self you can live with. It's still a troublemaker, yes. It's still problematic, yes. You are still a nuisance to yourself and others, yes. But, well, you can live with it. But then, periodically, that sense of self becomes energized by the accumulated pain from the past that every human comes into this world with, that is inherited, genetically passed on. Because of human madness, there's a vast amount of human pain in the collective energy field. And this accumulation of pain, part of which is collective, part of which is personal through your present incarnation, accumulated in childhood through parents, and emotional pain. And the pain body is a field of contraction, aliveness, energy contracted, trapped, tight. And it has a life of its own almost, although it depends for its existence on you. It is a temporary life form that lives in you. And like most life forms, sometimes it's asleep and sometimes it's awake. So when it's asleep, okay, you have a self, you still have problems, but it's okay, you can deal with things. Then periodically the pain body becomes active. It moves into the mind structure that we call the self, and it energizes all those mind structures of the ego, the egoic self. And then you become a deeply unhappy self. And you are trying to make others unhappy. A deeply unhappy self will try to make others unhappy because it will also feed on others' unhappiness and emotional reactions. So its job is, when it flows into the egoic self, the pain body moves in, it is looking for food. And it will get food through your mind by feeding on your negative thinking about me and my life, my dreadful life, or all the dreadful people around me that shouldn't be here. What am I doing here? my dreadful life situation and my dreadful story, and it's awful. The pain body may either be anger predominantly, or it may be deep sadness, or it may be a great sense of heaviness, or it may be an agitation of fear. And then the fear moves into the mind. Oh, what's going to happen to me? What's he going to do if he leaves me? Or that happens, I lose my job. Or then all night you worry. Energized mind structures, mad mind structures, made even more mad by being energized by the pain body. And the pain body loves it. It gobbles up every negative thought. And it can go on for hours. It's feeding on the energy of your mind until it's had enough, and then... So that means you've gone through the pain body attack, or feeding time, whatever you want to call it, is over. And you feel relatively okay again. In the meantime, you've made many people unhappy around you. Because the pain body is not just feeding on your thoughts, it's feeding on other people's reactions. If anybody is around you, it'll try to get something from them, a painful, something to give me more pain, please. So I want you to be unhappy, because when you're unhappy, you will feed me your emotional reaction. I will absorb that, and it will feed me. So I will push your buttons. That is part of the madness of the self, the artificial mind-created sense of self, because it periodically becomes energized by collective human pain. And you think you're having a personal problem. There's nothing personal about it. It is human pain. It wants to be there. The pain body is having a great time. It's become you. It has taken possession temporarily. You are acting it out. And children have it, because humans are born with a pain body, some heavier than others. So children, you can see the transformation in a child very quick, from angelic to monster. But it doesn't last as long as with most adults. Usually children's pain body attacks are much more quickly, and it's gone again. And it's amazing when you watch the transformation from a human being into a pain body and back to a human being. So when you have children, family, tell them about the pain body. Use a different word, but so that a witnessing presence grows in them from where they can watch what's happening to them. Make it into a game. Begin by explaining it after a pain body attack, not in the middle. Don't say, this is your pain body, you must watch. Or, get rid of it. You shouldn't have a pain body. No, you allow, and then when the child has come back to full consciousness, you say, what was that? What was it that came over you? What did it feel like? And did you remember yesterday it also came in the morning, didn't it? Yeah, isn't that funny? What does it feel like? Maybe even temporarily give it a name so that it helps a little bit in witnessing it. And next time it happens, in the middle of it, you call out, there it is again. The child won't want to listen because the pain body is in charge, but something will be there, a little bit of witnessing will be there. And then the child will quickly discover that you also have a pain body. And so you work together. And I know of families, they've told me that often their children tell them, "Oh, what's that?" "It's your pain body, Mum," or whatever you want to call it. And that's wonderful. Witnessing comes in so the pain body cannot use you anymore. It cannot continue to feed on the cycle of unconsciousness, of becoming you and then feeding on your mind and on other people's emotions and reactions. So simply making it conscious is part of making the structure of the self, the false self, conscious. So that when you make it conscious, it no longer dominates you. You watch it for a little while, you watch it in action. It's still there. But there's a witnessing presence, and that is the presence that grows. And it grows even as you sit here. From now on, not a single person in this room will not have grown in presence through being here. And the ability to witness what otherwise is the most difficult thing to witness in yourself, which is that enormous amount of human pain, your ability to witness it will have grown. Even that applies even to those of you who have very heavy pain bodies. You are the most promising candidates for liberation. Those who have heavy pain bodies, because their longing to be free is greater. Can't stand this anymore. I had a dreadful pain body, and so I couldn't stand it anymore. Gone. Evaporated all at once, which is relatively rare. So it's a gradually it loses energy, its energy charge. It's fine. It doesn't turn into suffering anymore. It's simply emotional pain. Suffering requires a self, a mind-made self. Suffering requires a me and a storyline. Without a me and a storyline, you no longer suffer. Because there's nobody there to suffer. Because only if you have a story in your head of who you are and what your life is, that is suffering. What is left is simply pain, and even that is a word that we might not even need anymore. There's simply a certain energy field there that feels a bit agitated or tight or heavy. And you allow it to be, just as you allow whatever arises in this moment to be. Allowing to be implies, of course, you're there as the witness. You watch it, you allow it. Yes, there's the anger, there's the fear. Fear is a very common thing in every pain body has, even if it's not predominantly fear, an essential ingredient of every pain body is fear. There's fear somewhere. Even if it seems to be anger mostly, underneath it, you will find fear. And of course there's the desire not to want to feel it. It's the most normal thing in the world is not to want to feel fear. The most normal thing in the world is not to want to face it. Let's think about something else, so that I just don't want to feel what I feel. But you can't, because the feeling will catch up with your mind, and then it'll go into your thoughts, and you will think fearful thoughts. And by thinking fearful thoughts about what's going to happen to you, you're feeding the pain body. So you can see that how you can allow the pain body to be there and face it. Not harshly, but allowing is a gentle thing. Not face it by opposing it, or say, okay, let's see who is stronger. you or me. No. You simply, just as you would allow an event that takes place externally to be, you allow the pain body to be. It is. It is. There's a fear, and then you don't even need to call it fear anymore. There's simply that movement. And you lie there, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, it's used your mind for a while, and then you woke up out of identification with it, and all that's left now is that vibration that before you called fear, but now is simply a vibration. It's not that bad when it's no longer an unhappy me, it's only a vibration now. And you allow. Certain words may be helpful in your mind, just as little pointers, and the words that may be helpful may simply be, it is, or I allow it to be. It's what is in the field of now. Let it be there. It's there, so let it be there. And that what then develops is, even around the pain, a spaciousness through the allowing. And that at first it's only a hint of spaciousness around the pain. And then it grows. You allow more. You continue to allow. And there's still the vibration, but the sense of spaciousness around it gets larger. And that may begin with simply being able to feel the space in your body where there is no pain body. The pain body may be, the vibration of it may be here, but in your arms or legs, there's still a spaciousness, an aliveness, and you feel that. That becomes part of the space around the pain body. And so you sense the field of spaciousness in which the vibration happens. And gradually the shift happens from, you realize the spaciousness is so much vaster than the pain that's happening in it. Before there was only the pain, and I was the pain. It was dreadful, dreadful. And now the pain is no longer I, it's no longer a self, it's no longer an unhappy little entity, it's simply a vibration. And around the vibration, because you allowed it to be, there is a space. And then the space, the sense of space grows, the allowing becomes deeper, and then the little smile comes. It's only a vibration. It's not that bad at all. It's okay. It's just life vibrating. Something was trapped in here. And through accepting and realizing the space that is around it, that energy then becomes freed, that was trapped in the pain body, and becomes aliveness, ultimately consciousness. It contributes to your sense of presence, like putting something into a fire, and then the fire consumes it, it grows stronger. So the pain body becomes fuel for your presence, and then there's a vast sense of spaciousness, and remnants perhaps, little remnants of pain still appearing here and there. That's called freedom, that's called liberation. It's a simple process, so it is a process of depersonalizing pain, of realizing that there is not a person in it. It is a fiction to believe that my identity is that suffering me. It's human pain. The whole transformation of consciousness that we are involved in is a sense of depersonalizing your sense of identity. so that your sense of identity is not trapped in an image of me, the little person, the personalized sense of self, this narrow, personalized me with my past and my future, both of them very problematic. And when that goes, you are no longer a problematic entity. And the little self says, who would I be without my problems? Oh, I don't know if I want to let go of all of that. So many years invested. Step out into the unknown. So familiar with the miserable little me. But you are stepping out, and it is dissolving. That's the beauty of transformation and the simplicity of it. And the pain body is your greatest asset in the arising of presence, because it is the energy that is trapped in the pain body will fuel presence. Presence will transform it into itself. So, if you have a heavy pain body, you're lucky. If you have a light pain body, there's still hope for you too. Humanity has come to the end of suffering. That is, with the end of the old consciousness, humanity has come to the end of suffering. And you see, the suffering has been unbelievable. The madness of it, self-inflicted, most of it, self-inflicted suffering we are coming to the end of suffering. We have suffered enough as a species. You have suffered enough. No further suffering is needed to become free. You've had enough to be here. Are we feeding the insanity of mind and the planet by watching violence on the news, TV, or movies? Yes. And who is watching the violence? The pain body. Who is financing all these violent films? Pain bodies. Who makes these violent films? Pain bodies. Make them, pain bodies watch them. Pain bodies love them, pain bodies pay to watch them. So I forgot to mention that another way in this culture, in this civilization, in ancient times we didn't have the TV and movies, so all the pain body had to feed on was your mind and other people's emotional reactions. But now we have a whole industry designed to feed pain bodies. Why else would anybody watch violence on a screen and pay for it and sit there and love feeling bad? Oh, dreadful, dreadful, but they pay to get in. Because it feeds the pain body. There is a whole industry designed to feed the human pain body. Amazing. And no talk about let's abolish violence. Politicians say let's abolish the violence on TV. They won't, because there's a great demand for it. Who is demanding? Pain bodies. They love it. And as long as they are there, they'll produce those things. It's amazing. One doesn't see the madness of our civilization because we are so used to it. But when you see it, it's almost funny when you see it's a tragic comedy. But it turns into a comedy, begins when you watch it, when you watch your own tragedy and realize it as a story, when you watch your own drama and realizing as a mind-created fiction designed to give you a sense of identity in the absence of any true sense of identity. Okay, I'll hang on to the miserable one. It's when you see it, the drama, your own drama as illusion, then you either laugh or smile. And then you begin to laugh and smile a lot more when you see it around you. There was a time when I would see people privately a lot, and people would come in, and many people then, I don't see people, rarely see people privately, and when I do, not many people tell me their stories anymore, but there was a time when they did, and often as I sat there, simply in a sense of allowing this unhappy me to be there, and a great sense of presence and peace and aliveness. And while they told me their drama, I couldn't help but there was always a smile on my face. No thought, just a smile. And then sometimes he got angry and said, "You're laughing at me I'm telling you all this, it's serious stuff, and you're laughing at me." And then I had to explain, no, I can see that this is an illusion. What do you mean? It's an illusion? Yes, and it feels so good to just be here. The presence is so wonderful. That's why I smiled. It's nothing to do with your particular story. And some left at that point. The teaching hadn't developed quite yet that fully, so I wasn't able to explain as well as I explain now. And some just left. Another interesting event is sometimes when pain bodies arise while people sit in a group situation and the pain body is being addressed and something inside quivers. Let's get out of here. Somebody's looking at me. Pain bodies don't like to be looked at. I'm using looked at as almost a metaphor, which means to put the light of attention on it. Because they thrive in non-attention, inattention, if that's the word. They thrive in and through unconsciousness. When you become conscious and look at the pain body directly, it shrinks, it withdraws, it tries to get away. It might become extremely dormant, pretend that I'm not here anymore. But it's waiting, just like a fox would be very clever. It's waiting for a better moment. And so sometimes sitting here is not the best moment, but some heavy pain bodies have reacted in a group because they couldn't stand it anymore. They were being addressed directly, and suddenly they became agitated, and one person gets up and stomps out of the room, or even shouts, happened once, shouts something. "This is all a load of rubbish," somebody in England once shouted. "It's all a load of rubbish." And there was a pain body speaking. It was such a perfect illustration it was just a small group I had then, 15 people or so, but it was such a perfect illustration of what I had just been speaking about that other people thought I had engaged an actor to illustrate. So the question to, yes, you are feeding the pain body when you watch violence, but probably your desire to watch violence will be greatly diminished if it's still there, simply by being conscious of that process. You may still occasionally feel that in you which wants to watch it. It may still be, but then you can, oh, there it is. And news, of course. News is also mentioned in the question. There are a few people in a few offices around big cities, and they choose what they give you, feed you as news. They choose, say, this matters, this is important, we are going to feed them this and that and that. And what they choose is an expression of their state of consciousness. And often the pain body is an important part of their state of consciousness. So what you watch is not actually the world news, is what a few people who embody a particular state of consciousness, and usually it's not the new one, choose as significant. And you can imagine what they choose, and you know what they choose. There's a lot happening that they wouldn't choose. And yet, even there, occasionally, even into television, where there's relatively little consciousness, which usually pulls you into unconsciousness, but even there are sometimes consciousness moves into that channel also. It happens through a few programs that bring in more awareness, even a few films. And I got a letter recently written by a TV station, and the interviewer, a person who interviews, said, I would like to ask you if you want to be interviewed for TV, Canadian National Television, CTV, but I very much doubt that you will agree to my request because of what you said. And then he quoted something that I had said in the letter, which is, if you want to find out about the insanity of the human condition, I recommend that you read a history book or you watch TV tonight. So he said, I know it's unlikely that you will give me an interview, but I just want to ask anyway. I am very happy if consciousness, I don't reject TV as a medium. If consciousness moves through it, it's beautiful, and perhaps this will happen increasingly. There are some programs that are expressions of Oprah is doing very great work, has already transformed many people's lives, and a few others. So that there is something there that is moving towards an awakening. So I may say yes to the interview. And the amazing thing is they want to put it out as part of their news program. This is a miracle. I've been saying for years in groups, our meeting here is not going to be on TV tonight, I say. Because it's not significant enough for the people who choose what is significant. In fact, it's extremely significant. It's one of the most significant events on the planet, is this gathering. It goes beyond the personal, because it's about the transformation of human consciousness. And oftentimes I've said in groups like this, you see, but they're not going to put it on TV tonight. And perhaps soon they will. That would be another miracle. So, what is your identity, Mr. Tolley? Are you not a man, a spiritual teacher, a knowledgeable person, a successful author? In other words, do you not have goals and desires? How else would you have achieved your present status, quote unquote, or position, quote unquote, as a teacher? I'm just looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4 definitions. Yes, a man, that's a part of my form identity, happens to be that. It's been like that since birth. But a spiritual teacher, a knowledgeable person or successful author, that's fairly recent. I wasn't, even a few years ago, well, at some point somebody called me a spiritual teacher, and that was probably the beginning. But for many years, when I left my normal existence behind, I was really nobody. I didn't have a job. Occasionally people would come to talk to me or ask questions, or little groups here and there, small groups, people would come. But I had no identity on an external level, not even spiritual teacher, certainly not a successful author. And a knowledgeable person, I was that once, but most of the knowledge I had acquired at university has disappeared. I wouldn't be able to pass a single exam now. And even the spiritual books that I've read, there's not that much that has been retained. A few things, not a lot. A successful author, yes. My mother is very happy now. Because for many years, what made her existence so hard was to know that her son had failed in the world. Her son hadn't made it. And that's, many mothers would have felt it in her position, because on a worldly level, I hadn't made it. Nobody really. Not an important position, no position at all. So she said, what a pity, you've had so much intelligence and you've thrown it all away, and now it's too late. And then suddenly the book came and it became successful, and now I am a successful author. And my mother is very happy now, because the world is telling me and her that I'm somebody. There's no difference at all. Before, the world was saying, well, it wasn't even saying I'm nobody, it wasn't saying anything. That's even worse. The whole basis of the teaching is to honor your form identity. Yes, you're a man or you're a woman and you have a certain job. Of course you honor your form identity, but to realize that who you are is not that. Your essential nature is not being somebody. Your essential nature is being nobody or nothing, a no-thingness. Your essential nature is not content, is not object. There is a no-thingness to your essential nature. That is the whole teaching. And to see the beauty and the peace and the aliveness of that no-thingness, that is the essence of your being. That's the teaching. I'm not denying that you also exist as a form, a temporary form, which will go. But while it's there, you can honor, of course, also that temporary form, and you will, but not derive your sense of identity from that. You simply know it as the form that you are. Clocks are strange things. It seems to me that no time has passed, and yet it's exactly the same now, but the hands have moved. Strange. And I have another 43 questions. I do keep all the questions, and I may use some of them. I may also use some of the answers that I gave here, but I do value all your questions, and I thank you. If they were not answered here, most of them were not. Now, what I'm saying now, don't take it as a personal insult. No question is that important. No answer is that important. It's fine to have these questions, but really why we are here is to go beyond the need to figure it all out, beyond the need to know, and contact that deep sense of knowing that is there when the need to know is no longer there. That in that presence, whatever you truly need to know at this moment, you will know. Essential knowledge, vital knowledge, not the distance between here and the moon or something like that. No, vital, essential knowledge. If there's anything that you truly need to know, out of all you need to be is become still. Enter that alert stillness. Drop the question. You've asked the question, then you drop the question. Enter the alert stillness. If you truly need to know the answer, it'll come sooner or later. You will know. Not perhaps immediately. Suddenly it'll be there. Whatever it is, you take it into the stillness. Many things will dissolve in the stillness. Or many questions dissolve in the stillness. But if an answer is needed, it will be there. But the transformation of consciousness that you are going through, that is happening through that form, is not based on answers. No answer to a question could help you, and you don't need that, because the transformation of consciousness is happening already. You don't need to understand more about it on the mind level than you do now. I don't understand more about it than what I have said on the level of concepts. There's a deep knowing, but there's not mental understanding that is more than what I have said. I read something from a physicist recently who described human beings as patches of consciousness floating in space. Little patches of consciousness. That's what you are. There's only one consciousness expressing itself as this particular patch of consciousness. So you're leaving here very soon, no longer with that heavy personalized sense of self, but greatly diminished in your sense of self. If it worked for you. So, this has not been a personal growth seminar. But a personal diminishment seminar. Thank you.